She is not alone. He is in the next room. She can hear him. If she called his name right now, he would answer. And yet, there is a particular kind of quiet that has settled into this apartment over the last year or two. Not the comfortable quiet of two people at ease with each other, but something thinner, something that has a quality of distance in it even when the distance is measured in feet. She could not tell you exactly when it arrived. She could not tell you if someone asked that anything is wrong. Because nothing is wrong. That is precisely the problem. She is not alone. He is in the next room. She can hear him. The specific sounds of someone existing nearby. The ambient evidence of another life unfolding in close proximity to hers. If she called his name, he would answer. If she walked in, he would look up. He loves her. She is certain of that. And yet there is this feeling. Sourceless, shapeless, embarrassing to admit even to herself that she is somehow fundamentally by herself in this relationship. Not abandoned, not betrayed, not in any kind of crisis she could point to, just not quite reached. She has not said this out loud, she is not sure she has the words for it, and even if she did, she would not know how to say it to him without it sounding like an accusation or a failure or both, so she carries it. The way people carry things they cannot name, and the longer she carries it, the heavier it gets. Loneliness is supposed to be about the absence of people. That is the version we understand. The single person in the apartment, the widowed spouse rattling around in too many rooms, the new arrival in a city that hasn't opened for them yet. But there is another version, quieter, more confusing, and in some ways harder to bear, that has nothing to do with the absence of people. It is the loneliness of being present with someone and not being fully met by them, of having a person right there, a person who chose you, a person who by every external measure loves you, and still feeling in some essential way unseen. This version of loneliness does not have a clean name. It does not arrive with the obvious distress that makes other people take you seriously when you describe it. It is difficult to explain to a therapist, almost impossible to explain to a friend, and very close to impossible to explain to the person causing it, especially because in most cases, they are not causing it intentionally. They are simply not reaching the part of you that needs to be reached, and neither of you fully understands why. Consider a man who has been married for 9 years. He loves his wife in the way that people love someone who has been woven so deeply into the fabric of their daily life that the person and the life are nearly indistinguishable. He is not unhappy, he does not lie awake wanting to be somewhere else, but there is a version of himself, a particular interior landscape that includes his real fears, his private embarrassments, his unresolved questions about his own life that has never fully been brought into the marriage, not because his wife is cold, she is not because she would judge him, he doesn't actually believe she would, but somewhere in the years of building a shared life, managing the house, raising the kids, navigating the thousand logistics that constitute a modern marriage, the space for that kind of conversation simply stopped appearing. The evenings fill up, the weekends compress. The moments that used to carry a certain openness have been replaced by the comfortable, efficient shorthand of two people who know each other's habits completely and each other's inner lives somewhat less. He could not tell you when this happened. He is not sure it happened at any single point. He is sure, though, that there is a version of himself that has no home in this marriage. And that is its own particular kind of alone. Here's what's actually happening in a relationship like that. When two people first become close, there is a process, sometimes described in attachment research as mutual vulnerability, where each person gradually allows the other to see further inside. The barriers come down in stages. Trust is demonstrated, then extended. The relationship expands to hold more and more of who each person actually is. This process feels almost automatic in the early stages of a relationship. The conversations go deep without effort. There is a naturalness to the disclosure. Each person is curious about the other in a way that feels urgent and alive. What most people don't realize is that this process requires active maintenance to continue. It does not sustain itself simply because the relationship continues. In fact, without deliberate attention, long-term relationships have a strong gravitational pull toward a different kind of intimacy. Call it functional intimacy, the intimacy of two people who know each other's schedules, preferences, moods, and habits with extraordinary precision. Functional intimacy is real. It is not nothing. There is genuine comfort in being known in this way. But it is not the same as being emotionally known. And over time, if functional intimacy becomes the primary mode of connection between two people, something begins to shift. The relationship starts to feel like a very well-managed shared life, less like a place where either person is fully themselves. Here is the part that creates the most confusion. In almost every relationship where one person is experiencing this kind of loneliness, the other person is not. Not because they're indifferent, not because they're selfish, because they are receiving enough. What feels like insufficient connection to one partner often feels like a perfectly adequate relationship to the other, because the other partner's threshold for felt intimacy is different. Their needs are being met at the level the relationship is currently operating at. This asymmetry is not a character flaw in either person. It is a mismatch in what each person requires to feel genuinely close. And it is almost never discussed, because the person who is not getting enough usually cannot articulate what enough would look like. They just know they feel something that shouldn't be there. They feel lonely in the presence of someone who loves them. And when they try to describe it, even to themselves, it sounds ungrateful, impossible, like a problem they should be able to think their way out of. So they don't describe it, they manage it. They make themselves smaller inside the relationship, gradually in ways they don't fully track, until the version of themselves that shows up day to day is an edited one. And the loneliness compounds. There is a dimension to this that goes back further than the current relationship. People come into relationships with templates, internal models built from early experience about what intimacy is supposed to feel like, what it means to be known, how much of yourself it is safe to bring to the person you love. For someone who grew up in an environment where emotional presence was inconsistent, where a parent was physically there but emotionally unavailable, where vulnerability was met with discomfort or deflection, the interior experience of loneliness within closeness is not new. It is familiar, and familiar is not the same as acceptable, but familiar has a way of becoming invisible, of being tolerated rather than named, of being absorbed into the background of what relationships simply feel like. These people often find themselves in adulthood in relationships that replicate the emotional temperature of what they grew up with. Not because they chose poorly, because the emotional thermostat was set early and the body is drawn toward the temperature it knows. The loneliness they experience with a loving partner is, in some cases, the loneliness they learned to carry as children, brought forward, set down inside the nearest available relationship. This does not mean the current relationship is wrong or that the partner is inadequate. It means the loneliness has roots the relationship alone cannot address. And understanding that distinction between loneliness that originates in the relationship and loneliness that the person brought with them matters enormously, because the solution looks different depending on which one it is. Sometimes both are true simultaneously. The most common response to this kind of loneliness inside a relationship is to stop talking about it. Not out of strategy, out of a reasonable sounding set of conclusions. He tries. He's a good partner. This must be something wrong with me. She would just feel attacked if I brought this up. It's not worth it. I can't even explain what I need. How can I ask for something I can't name? These conclusions feel logical. They are also almost uniformly the conclusions that allow the loneliness to deepen. Because the person who is lonely stops giving their partner the information the partner would need to show up differently. And the partner who is not experiencing the same deficit, who has no particular reason to suspect anything is wrong, continues behaving exactly as they have been, not out of negligence, out of the genuine absence of a signal that something is needed. There is a painful irony here. The loneliness creates the very silence that prevents the loneliness from being addressed. And in that silence, something important starts to happen. The lonely person begins very gradually to grieve the relationship they wanted, not the relationship that ended, but the one that never fully arrived. That grief is private, it is quiet, and if it goes on long enough, it starts to feel permanent. There is something specific about the pace and structure of contemporary life that makes this loneliness both more likely and harder to detect. We are more connected than any generation in history. We have more tools for communication. We are surrounded by more information about relationships, what healthy ones look like, what to expect, what to ask for, and we are, by most accounts, lonelier. Not just single people, people inside relationships, Part of what's happening is straightforward. When two people are fully occupied with careers, with children, with the administrative complexity of modern life, the margin for genuine emotional presence shrinks. The evenings that might once have held a real conversation now hold the logistics review of who's handling what tomorrow. But there is something subtler happening as well. The visibility of other people's relationships, particularly through social media, has created a reference point that functions less like inspiration and more like comparison. When the gap between what you see and what you feel becomes too wide, the natural response is to silence what you feel, to decide that the problem is your expectations, not your reality. The loneliness gets attributed to ingratitude, to being too needy, to not appreciating what you have. And the actual experience, the specific, real, legitimate experience of not being sufficiently met inside a relationship that looks, from the outside, like more than enough, gets buried. Here is what this kind of loneliness is actually measuring. It is not measuring the absence of love. It is measuring the gap between the relationship as it exists and the relationship as it could exist if both people were more fully present to each other. That gap is almost never dramatic. It is not the product of fundamental incompatibility or catastrophic failure. It is the product of two people who have gradually stopped being genuinely curious about each other. Not because they stopped caring, but because familiarity creates an illusion of knowledge. After years together, it is easy to believe you know someone, their opinions, their habits, their reactions, the trajectory of almost any conversation you could have with them, and that belief, that comfortable, reasonable, often accurate belief, quietly crowds out curiosity. Why ask what they're really thinking when you already know? Why go deeper in a conversation when you can anticipate where it goes? Why risk the vulnerability of revealing something new about yourself when the relationship is already stable? These are not decisions people consciously make. They are the default settings of long familiarity, and they create, gradually, a relationship in which two people know each other very well, and are genuinely known by each other somewhat less than they were years ago. The person who feels lonely inside that relationship is not imagining something that isn't there. They are accurately perceiving the gap. They are feeling the distance between being loved and being known, and those two things, love and being known, are not the same thing. Love can exist in a relationship where one person carries a part of themselves that the other has never been invited into. It can be real and sincere and lasting, but it cannot substitute for the experience of being genuinely understood, of bringing the most complicated, uncertain, least presentable version of yourself into the room and having someone receive it without flinching. That experience, that specific experience, is what the lonely partner is missing. Not love, witness. She still has not found the words, but something shifted when she stopped framing it as a problem with the relationship and started recognizing it as information about what the relationship needed. She was not too much. She was not broken. She was not ungrateful for what she had. She was someone who needed to be more fully known by the person who loved her. And the loneliness, which had felt like a verdict, like evidence that something was fundamentally wrong with her or with them, turned out to be a compass, pointing the whole time toward the conversation that hadn't happened yet. She did not know, when she finally had it, how it would go, but she had stopped waiting to have the right words before she tried, because the loneliness she had finally understood was not something she could carry alone and expect it to resolve. It required two people, the one she was and the one in the next room. If this episode described something you've been carrying around without a name for it, that recognition is worth something. Being lonely inside a relationship doesn't mean the relationship is wrong. It means something in it is asking to go deeper. The Connection Theory publishes new episodes every week on the psychology of love, connection, and human behavior. If this is the kind of conversation you want to keep having, subscribe.